Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
Actually, Srila Prabhupada brought me to Krishna consciousness. I had seen the devotees in Berkeley on the street. I'd given donations, bought magazines, taken prasadam and so on, and seen a Hare Krishna festival in the Berkeley Hills. But then I went to see Prabhupada give a lecture in the International House of the Berkeley campus, University of California at Berkeley. And it was actually upon seeing Prabhupada there that I really became fixed on Krishna consciousness. I had seen other so-called swamis and religious leaders. Actually, for a sociology of religion class, I had to go and observe different religious performances and ceremonies, and I'd gone to see a swami. It seemed like he wasn't saying anything practical or substantial, telling people how to relax. Just as Prabhupada, he always says that he was reluctant to go to see his spiritual master because he'd seen so many so-called sadhus. So in a little way, there's some similarity. But I went to see Prabhupada, and as soon as he entered the auditorium, I could see that this person is very different. His gravity, his power, his demeanor, he seemed to be practically like a military commander coming in. Not in the sense of a violent person or anything like that, but just as authority. Here was a person I could see obviously that was filled with authority and yet serene at the same time. So the program started, the devotees began to chant. Prabhupada got up off the Vyasasana and began dancing, jumping in ecstasy. He was obviously an elderly person. That was in 1969, so he was over 70 years old. So to see this holy person so much filled with authority, over 70 years old, dancing in ecstasy, was quite overwhelming.
One of the first observations actually that struck me, one of the things that I saw when I was first with him, after I'd joined him in Delhi, we then went to Vrindavan, and we were there for about 10 days. So I got a real chance to see Prabhupada in action. By that time I was able to live in his quarters, and Prabhupada, the first instruction that he gave me was that now your only business is to be with me 24 hours a day. So I took that quite literally, except of course when I was asleep. But I was with him day in and day out, and I got the chance to observe everything that he did, everything that he spoke, every little action that he did. And it really struck me very strongly that Prabhupada was like a living Srimad Bhagavatam. You know, in the Bhagavatam there's a full description there of what it means to be Krishna conscious. And of course there's volumes and volumes of books that describe that. And if you read them, then it might seem like, well, this is going to take a long time, you know, to realize what all of this is. It's such a vast subject. You know, what does it mean to be Krishna conscious? But it was all there in Srila Prabhupada, you know, at every moment. So I saw that, I understood that, and I resolved in my mind that I would take as much advantage of the opportunity to see him as possible, that just by observing how he did everything, how he managed things, how he spoke, how he walked, how he relaxed, how he dealt individually with different people, you know, that would show me the best example of Krishna consciousness. And you know, it just really struck me. Prabhupada was like a living, breathing Bhagavatam.
Everybody was singing Sri Guru Charana Padma, and Prabhupada was on the Vyasasana, and he was also closing his eyes and playing Kartal and singing. So I asked Lokanath Swami, isn't this a song in glorification of Prabhupada? And he said, yes. So I said, how come he himself is singing it? So he said, he's singing it to his spiritual master. Because the day before, Lokanath Swami has asked me for putting my name for initiation. And I said, I will tell you, not yet. And after I heard this explanation from Lokanath Swami, I said, you write my name for initiation. Then he said, why suddenly now? You know so many books, you this, that, and you always said wait, and now you're telling? So I said, yes, I'm telling because I can see that he will be my spiritual master. This is in Hindi. Oye honge means he would be my spiritual master, because when he is glorified, he is glorifying his spiritual master. So now I know that this is actually succession. So you put my name for initiation. And my name was added, Swami Atmananda. And I heard from other God brothers that Prabhupada, when he was looking at the names for initiation, he said Bhakta this, Bhakta this, Bhakta that, and he said Swami. So he said, who is this Swami? So someone told him, it's a new Bhakta. So Prabhupada said, new Bhakta Swami? And then he said, all right, what's his name? Atmananda. So then Prabhupada said, Apashyatam Atma Tattvam Griheshu Grihamedinam. His name will be Atma Tattva.
When I got initiated in Los Angeles, I got a little piece of paper with my name that said Hridayananda. And so for some reason, I can't explain it or justify it, when I got my paper, I thought it was Hridayananda, but someone that just left out the A. The secretary had written it wrong. Can't explain that one. So when people said, what's your name? I said Hridayananda, which sounds like a perfectly good Krishna conscious name. In fact, it even means something in Sanskrit. So no one ever questioned me. No one ever said, that doesn't sound like a bona fide name. So for the first several months after I was initiated, I was Hridayananda to the world, not to Prabhupada. In fact, there's an old Back to Godhead article by Hridayananda Das Brahmachari. Anyway, so I wrote Prabhupada a letter probably about approximately a year after my initiation, and signed it Hridayananda. And Prabhupada wrote back and said, Dear Hridayananda, please accept my blessings. By the way, your name is Hridayananda. So I thought, how in the world would Prabhupada remember me? Then when I went to Gainesville, Prabhupada wrote a letter to some of the other devotees in the temple, the young devotees, and said, now, he said, Hridayananda is there, so I'm sure everything will go on nicely. And I was thinking, how in the world does Prabhupada remember who I am? So I was amazed by that, because I had no real importance within the structure of ISKCON. I was just a young member, and I was amazed that Prabhupada remembered who I was.
I think the quality of Srila Prabhupada that really touched me the most was just the fact that he was so warm, and he was just so kind. It was such, from being with Prabhupada, you could immediately understand that he had a genuine concern for your welfare. He was serving us, he was putting himself out in so many different ways, just to give us the chance for spiritual life. And it made you want to reciprocate by just offering whatever service that you could to Srila Prabhupada. So there was a nice reciprocation going on, and I always felt very, very comfortable in Prabhupada's presence. Of course, there was the formal guru-disciple relationship, and one had to be careful not to transgress that. But at the same time, Prabhupada was very, very accommodating. He was very, wonderfully warm and humble person. And he always made you feel, wanted. He always made you feel significant in some way, that he knew what you were doing and he was happy with it, and he would encourage you. Of course, he would also chastise you at different times if you did things wrong. But that chastisement had the same effect as, his praise. It made you Krishna conscious, and you understood it was for your own benefit. It was never, from any material kind of motivation. So that was the one thing that always stood out in my mind with Srila Prabhupada, was that he was very happy to be with us. He very much appreciated the fact that young men had given up the best part of their lives for, spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. And he always showed that appreciation.
So then on the initiation day, Radhashtami, before that for about 2 weeks I had some infection inside my mouth, so I couldn't brush my teeth properly. I was just gobbling with water, hot water and salt. And Delhi temple, Rajpat Nagar, very small room. It's a big Vyasasan. There's a fire is here, deities are here, fire is here, and Vyasasan is here, and Prabhupada sits at the tip of the Vyasasan like this. It's a big lotus asan. And I was like this close when I went to get the bead. So he's asking, Char niyam kya hai? So I said, no meat eating. And my mouth was like this close to his nose. And Prabhupada, he was sitting like this and like that, and he opened his eyes. He looked at me and he said, "Aap daan theek se saaf kyun nahi karte? Why you're not cleaning your teeth properly?" So I said, "Infection." So he said, "Infection." Then he turned around, took the bead from Gopal Krishna ji, gave it to me, chant 16 rounds. It was like, infection is the observation and chant 16 rounds is his prescription. And then he said, "Your name is Atma Tattva Das." They banged the mridanga, Hari Bol, and I came and sat down. I was not there. I was thinking, something has happened to me. I got initiated. I have a bead and I have my guru, and I was completely emotional. So that evening, right in the lawn in front of the temple, Prabhupada is giving evening darshan. So I took the chamara, went to fan him so that I can be close. So I most probably maybe I was doing a big number on the chamara, one of those. So and it's Radhashtami, it's cold. So he was feeling cold. So he looked at me like that. So then I became so slow that the flies were sitting on his face. And again he looked at me like that while he was singing Radha Madhava, and I was so scared. So I didn't know whether to go fast or to go slow, but still I didn't want to give up that because I wanted to be there looking at him. So he sings Radha Madhava and then he does Jayam prayers, and then thank you very much, and then he looks at me like this and said, "Material life is an infection." And there was like, some big bulldozer on my head. And then he puts his hand out, he lifts his shirt like this, and he said, "You scratch, then you feel satisfied." Then he put his hand out again, "You scratch more, you feel some satisfaction. You scratch more, then you stop. Not because you are satisfied, but blood comes." The rest of it I didn't hear. This line I just remember. And I was there just moving like a machine, but I was going through my whole life and I was seeing that this person has gone into me and taken an X-ray report and given to me. "Yeah, that's what you are." Blood came. And that was very moving for me, that he taught me exactly. And I have heard many disciples saying the same thing. He was seeing through me and he said to me. And I have heard that before. And I was thinking that I had faith. I knew that happens, but when it happens to you, it's totally different. Because it's happened to you. It's not somebody else. So I was completely like somebody went through me inside with a ray and came out. And I was very happy.
We were in Prabhupada's room once, in the early 70s. I was sannyasi, so maybe 73, 74. And it was a beautiful afternoon. The sun was setting and golden rays were shining on Prabhupada. It was very sublime. A nice breeze was blowing. It was a very beautiful atmosphere. And Prabhupada took us back to old India, the turn of the century, and when he was a child, when he was a young householder, and he took us there actually, and he began to talk about how people used to work and relationships between householders and their servants, and how people used to cook and things. So there we were back in India with Prabhupada. And then he took us back farther to his early childhood, when he was playing with, not playing, but having the Rath Yatra and worshipping Radha Govinda. And then only Karanda and I were in the room. The Prabhupada looked at us very strongly and said, whatever I'm doing now, I was doing then. Do you understand? And of course we were at that point kind of speechless. And then Prabhupada said, never was there a time when I did not know Krishna. Do you understand? And he said it in such a way that it was clearly the case. So that was a very powerful experience.
Whenever Prabhupada talked about anything, somehow or another, he could link it to Krishna consciousness and derive some kind of spiritual point from it. For instance, when we were in India, he would sometimes talk about the British rule in India and how they managed things. But he would always use that as a practical example for us, how we should manage things. Sometimes he would talk about, recent Indian history, but he would do it in such a way that he would point out how a person was either acting, in a genuinely spiritual way, or whether it was just a mundane thing. He would relate it to, say the degradation of Indian culture and why the Vedic culture was disappearing, whatever. But Prabhupada had this unique ability to see Krishna in everything and to explain things in such a way that we could also see it. He was always teaching, and Prabhupada was very conscious of the fact that he was always teaching us at every moment. He had, there was no private life for Šrila Prabhupada. His life was the life of an acharya, so it meant that he was, in the spotlight, so to speak, at every moment of every day. And he was remarkably consistent. That was another feature also that I appreciated, was that Prabhupada's absolute regularity in what he was doing always amazed me. We traveled all around the world, and he would keep the same schedule. He would do the same things day in, day out, and be completely steady and not disturbed at all. And he would be up in the middle of the night translating his books. He would go out for his morning walk. He would take his massages. He would have his meals at the same time, no matter what. It didn't matter where we were going. Now, I was suffering jet lag, as we traveled around. Prabhupada seemed completely impervious to it. It just didn't seem to affect him. He would just go right on. And as soon as we arrived in a new place, he would immediately be into his schedule, and that was it. He never showed any sign of, fatigue or disturbance at all.
One big businessman, he came, and he was saying, Swamiji, I have this factory here in Delhi, and I have that factory in Zonpur, and he gave a list of his things, and then he said, I have all this, but I can't sleep. So Prabhupada looks at him and he says, that is why you can't sleep. You give all this to me, then you can peacefully sleep. So then he turns to somebody who was sitting there, and he said, I think it was Gopal Krishnaji. He said, take his address. So this man says, no, Swamiji, I can come anytime. You can come anytime, but we should also be able to come anytime. Take his address. And then he was ready, So yes. And said, no, Swamiji. Prabhupada said, no, take his address. We will relieve you of your problem. You give some of these things to Krishna, then you will be peaceful. And he was like smashed right there. And he did give his address. He had to.
We brought Miss Mexico to see Prabhupada. In those days we were young and we thought any celebrity, let's bring them to Prabhupada. So we brought Miss Mexico, and she came in. She was nice, fluttering her eyelashes. And obviously she, as all these, Miss America, Miss Mexico, they spend their year just going around and doing events and, getting their picture taken and smiling, saying a few nice words here and there. So she was more or less in that mood. She came with a few gentlemen. So as she sat in front of Prabhupada, she made her customary spiel. She said it was very nice being in Mexico. In Spanish, I was translating. She said, "I'm very glad to be here. I've enjoyed the program very much, and I hope to come again sometime." So Prabhupada said to her, "Why do you want to come again?" In other words, he was not at all concerned with the glamour of it all. He was very sober, and he said, "Why do you want to come again?" And she couldn't really answer. No one ever asked questions like that to Miss Mexico. And he asked her very seriously, "Why do you want to come?" Then we had Prabhupada's books on a shelf. He said, "Have you read my books?" She said, "No." He said, "Then why do you want to come? Why do you say you want to come again?" So she was caught without an answer, and at that point she stopped being Miss Mexico and just started being a soul.
So there was one time, it was on the disappearance day, of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. We were in Bombay, and this lady came for darshan in the afternoon. So she was a follower of another guru, and this man was a well-known Mayavadi. So during the course of the conversation, there was some discussion on the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, and of course this woman was espousing her guru's ideas of what the Bhagavad Gita actually meant. And especially there was one interpretation of Krishna, what Krishna meant. So of course in Sanskrit the word Krishna means dark. So this man had written in his commentary that Krishna means dark, dark means unknown, so the absolute is the unknowable, supreme, unmanifest, like this. It was a Mayavadi interpretation. So Prabhupada very quickly fired back that he said, well, if dark means unknown, if Krishna is unknown, then if he does not know Krishna, then why is he commenting on the Bhagavad Gita, which is Krishna's words? And he said that actually to the devotee, Krishna says, to the devotee, I am known. So he said, therefore this man, because he's not a devotee, he cannot know Krishna, and only the devotees can actually comment on the Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada was very expert. He could pick out the flaw in anybody's argument immediately. And of course in India you always got a lot of this kind of, different kinds of interpretations and, false ideas and misconstruing, the words of the Bhagavad Gita. But Prabhupada was very expert on keeping a person focused that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
When Prabhupada came to Gainesville in 1971, at the end of July, a wonderful visit. He was being interviewed. He arrived, he sat on the vyasam we'd made for him, and he gave a beautiful lecture. Then he was taking questions. There was one girl there, I guess that was 1971, but at that time she was a young girl. And in a somewhat challenging tone, she said to Prabhupada, I see that you have mostly young people here. Why is that? So Prabhupada immediately shot back, why do you have mostly young people in your university? And she was so much caught off guard, I remember she actually dropped her pencil. And she sort of, groped for an answer, stuttering, and said, well, that's the age of education. He said, yes, therefore that is the age of Krishna consciousness. Another such exchange like that, where a few days before I took sannyas, Prabhupada was being interviewed by a reporter in his quarters in L.A., and he knew something about Hinduism. He said, well, isn't it in India that old people take sannyas? Why are you giving sannyas to young people? So Prabhupada shot back, what does it mean to be old? The man had no answer. Prabhupada said, old means about to die. Can you say that I'm older than you? Can you say that you're not going to die before me? Can you say? And he couldn't answer that. He said, therefore we are giving them sannyas.
I was cleaning the temple room in Lajpat Nagar, and this one old gentleman came and he was paying obeisances to the deities. And he said, Krishna Guruvayurappa. This Guruvayur is a deity in South India, in Kerala, and only Keralites and South Indians, they call the deity by that particular name and the accent. So I went to him and I asked him, are you from Kerala? He said, yes. And then we started talking in his language. My language is Tamil, that is Malayalam. So while we were talking, and he found out that, I am initiated by Prabhupada and all that. So he said, I want to become a disciple of Swami Prabhupada. And I asked year before, and they told me that I have to be 6 months, serving in the temple. And he lifted his dhoti and showed me his leg. It was swollen up with water. And he was about 60 years old. He said, I was a railway officer, I retired and I have big problem with my legs. And I cannot do those things that they are saying. And they said, if you cannot do, then you cannot become his disciple. So, can you please do something, tell Prabhupada so that he will accept me as his disciple. So I said, I am just become disciple, and the system is the temple president has to give you recommendation. And if the temple president has told you this, then there is no question of, me doing something about that. But then I said, but you can do one thing, you can just go to Prabhupada himself and ask him. These are rules set by Prabhupada, but if he wants, he can do anything. So you may go and see him, he sees people every evening. So he said, anybody can go. I said, well, it's free darshan, everybody is going. You come tomorrow and see him. Come early, so you'll be the first person. And I told him, you bring something for him. You bring a plate with some cloth, some coconut, some flowers, some sweets and some dakshina. And you bring in, give it to him. That's our tradition. You're from Kerala. So he said, yes, I will do. Next day, he came with a big plate covered by a cloth. And it was only like 4 o'clock. Prabhupada starts giving darshan at around 5. And I told him, you wait here, they will tell and they will come. Then just about 10-15 minutes later, Harisuri Prabhu looked down and he said, if anyone is there, they can come for darshan. And he was the only person. So I said, look, you're so fortunate. There's nobody. Now you just get up and go there. And he was shivering. He was saying, well, let somebody come. I said, this you don't do. You want to get something done which is not normal. So you must be there as quick as possible. Get your thing done. So he got up and I came with him. He came, he put the plate on Prabhupada's desk. And Prabhupada looked at him like this and he said, yes. So this man, he was all like emotional. And he had a bead bag and a bead on top of that plate. And he was holding that like this and he said, Prabhupada, I want to chant Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada smiled at him and said, so who is stopping you? He said, Prabhupada, I want to chant Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada said, is that your bag? He said, yes. Prabhupada took that. And he said, do you know how to chant Hare Krishna? So he said, I know the mantra. And he said, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Prabhupada said, yes. Took the bead out. And he did like this. Comes to the head bead. And he said, you start like this. And he said, and every bead you chant the whole mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And Prabhupada went to the next bead and went to the next bead and he chanted a whole round. Just like this. And he said, now you chant. Like he usually does when he gives the initiation. And I was so blissful. I thought this man is initiated without having to sweep the floor for 6 months, etc. He could have never done it because he would die if he does that. Because he's got like a glass bottle-like leg with water. How can he ever do anything like that? So I met this. I went to meet this man after some time. After traveling somewhere else, I came back. I met this man. He was still chanting, and he's got a big picture of Prabhupada in his room. The second time when I went to meet him, he was gone. And they said to me that they couldn't take the bead off his hand. And he just chanted. In last 2-3 weeks of his life, he just chanted and he didn't do anything else. And the last week, he didn't even go to the bathroom or anything. He was just one place looking at Prabhupada's picture and chanting. And the last thing they have heard was his chanting in his mouth when he left.
Prabhupada sometimes would joke as we entered his room, because obviously it's a very important thing when you would go into Prabhupada's room. I always considered it to be the most important event to go to before Prabhupada. So often I would come into his room very, very seriously, and he would sometimes sort of joke. One time I came into his room in that very serious mood, and he looked up at me and said with mock seriousness, "Yes, what is your message?" Another time I came to his room in New York, and he was just finishing his breakfast. He was in a very jolly mood, and I was on a college preaching tour, and he said, "Oh, Hridayananda Maharaj." He said, "You were actually traveling and preaching. I'm just here eating." Anyway, so he was pleased with the college preaching tour. There's an interesting follow-up to that. He was pleased with the college preaching tour. We talked about that for a while. So I was feeling very good. Prabhupada likes my program, and he gave me a little attention, so I was feeling very happy. Then the next day I went into Prabhupada's room thinking, well, here I am, the college preacher. And I sat in front of Prabhupada, and he didn't really speak to me. He was just doing his business. But there was a young girl, just some innocent girl, brahmacharini, who was changing Prabhupada's flower vases. And apparently with much devotion, so that Prabhupada was watching her and very pleased, smiling, just like a loving grandfather is watching this young girl change the flower vases. And he said to her, "Oh, thank you very much. What is your name?" So that day, Prabhupada didn't have a word for me, but he was rather very pleased by the devotion of this young girl. So in ISKCON, I was the sannyasi, etc., and she was just some innocent girl, but she's the one that pleased Prabhupada at that time, because I was thinking I'm a sannyasi, and she was just an innocent girl serving with much devotion. So I never forgot that lesson also.
Prabhupada liked to eat fairly simply. His, standard fare was for breakfast he had cut fruits. He would often take freshly fried cashew nuts. In India, sometimes we would give him a bowl of puff rice. And maybe just like one small half piece of sandesh. But that was generally it for breakfast. It was very light. For lunch, then he would have the standard rice dal and chapati, and then added to that one wet sabji, one dry sabji, and again maybe a small sweet. That was the basic. Then if the cook was good, then they could add more things to that, but those things must be there. And the chapatis, of course, Prabhupada liked them to be cooked hot. They had to be, fresh off the stove. And he had a little bell on his table. So when you first brought the plate in, there would be one hot chapati there. And then as he finished that one, then he would ring the bell, and then we would immediately puff up another one on the flames and then run in with it.
We were starting this Bulla Card party at that time. So when the inauguration of Bulla Card party that day, I was asked to bring some prasad and to offer to Prabhupada to give for all the devotees. So I, being a stupid South Indian, so I went there and I brought coconut and gur. That's what South Indian prasad is. But these coconuts were not soft, very hard. And then the gur was also not good class. So I had a big plate of pieces of coconut and gur. So it was brought in front of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada looked at, what is this? So Lokanath Swami says, this is prasad for, we are starting the bullock cart today. Oh, bullock cart? Put his hand there. And he took a piece of coconut and gur, small one, put in his mouth. And he was talking. The talk was about how we go about when we do the bullock cart party. What do we do? So he was having this on one side. He kept on talking, then he will move it to this side, like this, then to this side, to that side. This way he was keeping it till it all melted and he could actually eat it. So I was feeling very grateful, because I was thinking that I should have asked Lokanath Swami what prasad I should bring. It should have been some sandesh, because naturally this Prabhupada is so old and it's not something that hard should be given to him for eating. And even though it was unfit, he accepted that. Not only accepted that, he kept it in his mouth till he could actually eat it. It was suffering for an old person to do that, and talk also at the same time. And he went on explaining things and keeping on changing this from one side to the other side, and showing that, look, I have accepted it, because you've given it with love, so I have taken it.
From Australia we went to New Zealand, so when we got to New Zealand there was nobody available to cook there. So I was, it was my first time. I had to do the whole thing. So I put the cooker on the flame and went back, finished the massage, came back, and everything was totally ruined. I'd left the flame on too high, so all the dal had dried up in the bottom. The rice was like sludge. It had just, disintegrated. And the vegetables were so soft that they just fell apart. And there was nothing else, and there was nobody else there to do a quick job of cooking either. So I had to just serve what I had. So when Prabhupada saw it, he was really disappointed. And he said, what's this? So I said, well, I must have had the flame too high. So Prabhupada said, you are too dull. He said, you cannot cook. So that was my first attempt. It was a disaster. And I felt really bad, actually, because prasadam was a very important thing for Prabhupada. His digestive system at that time was very delicate. And of course, traveling around, it was very important that he get consistent, a consistent standard of food. Otherwise, all kinds of physical problems could come about. I remember once in Calcutta when Palika was cooking, and she was about 10 minutes late with his prasadam, and Prabhupada got really angry about it. And he demanded to see her, and she came up, and he really chastised her very strongly. And I hadn't seen him, at least chastise one of his women disciples as strong as that before. And so after he, complained very strongly, then after that he explained, he said, when the appetite comes up, it must be fed, otherwise disease comes. So we had, when I was with him, I regulated the standard for serving lunch prasadam to 1:30, regardless of when he finished the massage. And so by 1:30, of course, then he expected his prasadam to be there, and that means the thought of eating makes the juices in the stomach begin to flow, and then you have to feed it, otherwise then there's disease. So it was a science, and Prabhupada was aware of that. Apart from that, of course, Prabhupada did have problems in digesting food anyway, so it was very important to give him a good standard of prasadam on a regular basis. But unfortunately, I wasn't very good at it.
A few months after I'd taken sannyas, I was... When you take sannyas, of course, you really have to be very serious about Krishna consciousness, because it's a, especially for a young man, precarious position. So I was trying very hard to be a good sannyasi, I was a young sannyasi trying hard to be Krishna conscious, and then you realize not really Krishna conscious enough. As much, and Prabhupada deserves to be served much better than I felt that I'm serving him. So I was feeling a little bit in that mood, a little unhappy that I'm not serving Prabhupada properly. So, I thought, well, I better eat less, typical young man. I'm sure we all went through that, so I'm not going to eat very much. So I was trying to eat very little for a few days. So one day, we were out in Prabhupada's garden in Los Angeles, and we were coming back. Actually, every day he would come and get me, because I was trying not to impose on Prabhupada, but every day as he would walk down the stairs and go out to his garden, he would stop my little sannyasram, and he would just peek in the door, just walk in, look around, and just walk out and keep going. But of course, that was the signal, and I would immediately jump off my chair and off obeisance and run after him. So every day he would come and get me like that. So one day we were coming back from the walk, and as we got near the stairway in his quarters, just as they are now in L.A., on the radiator, I don't know, probably it's still not there, there was one of those old radiators there. And on top of it was a typical thing, a paper plate with a big mound of leftover prasadam. I don't know, potatoes or rice, whatever, just big thing like that. So Prabhupada stopped, put his cane down, looked at it. He turned to me and just said, "Eat that." So much for my austerities. So then I immediately offered obeisance and took the plate and ate it. I was in Prabhupada's room one time when Jadharani came in. Her health was not good, and she told Prabhupada she wanted to fast. And Prabhupada told her, "Don't fast completely, at least take fruit." He said it's not good to fast completely.
Prabhupada explained one of his strategies for making people Krishna conscious was to distribute profuse amounts of prasadam, because basically people are almost like animals. In this way they live. They don't know anything other than their bodies. So he said, at least let them eat prasadam. He said, then that way, they'll gradually, he said, then that's also Krishna. And they'll gradually develop an attraction to Krishna simply by eating the prasadam. And then when that develops, then they'll be able to inquire about the philosophy, or they'll be able to understand the philosophy simply by eating prasadam. So he said, this is our program, that we want people to become gradually Krishna conscious. And prasadam distribution was one, very definite, obvious way that they could make some advancement.
I think he also said personally he likes ghee, but he always said eat what you can digest. Prabhupada always said that. You should eat what you can digest. Prabhupada said to me, he said, if you eat what you like, it will be good for you.
My parents came to see me at the manor, and Prabhupada was in London, and I'd come back from London to the manor to meet with my parents. I hadn't seen them for about 5 years, and they had never seen me as a devotee. So during the course of the afternoon, I went to look for some prasadam for them, and there was none. I was told, well, we have an early Sunday feast here, and there's nothing left. So I was unable to give them any. Anyway, I took them around the manor, and I explained a bit of the philosophy, etc. They were unfortunate in that they didn't get to see Šrila Prabhupada. They were just about to leave, because they had a 4-hour drive home, when Prabhupada came back from London, and he came in through the gate just as we were stood there, and they were, saying goodbye. So they kind of got a glimpse, that was all. Anyway, so afterwards, after they'd gone, I went up to see Šrila Prabhupada, and he asked me, well, how did it go with your parents? So I said it was very nice, they were very favourable, and I showed them the deities, and we looked around, and I explained a bit of the philosophy. So then Prabhupada said, did they get prasadam? So they said, oh, well, actually I was told there wasn't any. And Prabhupada said, oh. It was almost like, well, what was the use? If they didn't get prasadam, then the whole trip was basically a failure. So, he put a lot of emphasis on prasadam. It was a very practical way, for a person to make advancement in Krishna consciousness.
And my mother was always, of course, nice to me, never favorable, to the movement. I mean, she was polite and respectful and all that, but not, always just thinking how to get me out of this thing. Typical mother. So I said, let's go see Prabhupada. So she went up and sat down in front of Prabhupada, and I saw her transformed actually. She became like a young girl sitting in front of Prabhupada. And of course by her culture she was very respectful and so on. And she became like a young girl, and Prabhupada began to tell her that how fortunate she was that her son was a devotee of Krishna, and she nodded in agreement. You know, her whole life since I joined was the opposite, but at Prabhupada's presence she was overwhelmed and she politely nodded in agreement. And then after a few minutes she went downstairs. And the only time she ever did that, she actually opened her purse and said, "Can I give you something for your movement?" You know, before his usual mantra, you know, "You sure it's just for you?"
Bulla cart was there, so next day when he walked around the yard, then he saw the bulla cart. We had a banner on the bulla cart which said, in a semicircle like this, it said, "Bhakti Vedanta Bulla Cart Traveling Sankirtan Party." It says traveling Sankirtan. So Prabhupada stood there and he put his head like this and he was reading, "Bhakti Vedanta Bulla Cart Traveling Sankirtan." And then he said, "Jai." So then he came to the bulls, fed them some grass, patted on their cheek like this. Then he said that these bulls are carrying Gaur Nitai for preaching. They will go back home, back to garden. They won't have another life.
Prabhupada was in Caracas, and we were desperately trying to get the first Spanish Bhagavatam, which was being printed in America, out of the printers and down to Caracas in time to give Prabhupada while he was still there in our zone. And he was flying from Caracas to Miami. So there were a few glitches, and the book was not coming in time. So we were disappointed. Then finally, somehow or other, frantic negotiations with the printer, and we arranged that the book was rushed down by air freight to Caracas, and it arrived the same morning Prabhupada was leaving. So we had some of our leaders there in Venezuela desperately, you know, trying to get it out of customs, and South America is not always the easiest place in the world to do things like that. Meanwhile, Prabhupada went to the airport, and you know, he was checked in and so on. We did all that for him. And to my great dismay, the book hadn't come, and Prabhupada went through the immigration check, passport check, and that was it. So just after Prabhupada had gone in and we'd paid obeisances, and I was a little disappointed, suddenly the book came. So I became so inspired to give this first Spanish Bhagavatam to Prabhupada. I was there, of course, with a shaved head and danda and so on. I just went running through the airport. You know, it's a South American country. There, you know, you can't just run through police checks and things like that in any country, and certainly not there either. But I was so inspired. Somehow Krishna just arranged everything, and I ran right past the passport check. No one said a word to me. Here I had a shaved head and a danda. Ran right past there were several checkpoints. You got to show this and show that. Ran past all of them. No one said a word to me. I ran right into the waiting lounge, the international waiting lounge, and went down, offered obeisances, and sat next to Prabhupada. He had me sit next to him. No official said a word to me. And I gave him the Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada was very pleased. He looked at it. Then he wanted to check to see if it was bona fide. So he said, "Can you translate this?" From Spanish back to English. I said, "Yes, Prabhupada." So he said, "All right." So he opened to the preface and said, "Read this in English." So I read it in English. Prabhupada saw it was correct. It was bona fide, so he was very happy. And then they called him for his flight just then, and he walked off holding the Bhagavatam and got on the plane, went to Miami.
I was holding the picture of Prabhupada in the front, that picture with a big flower garland, and Maharaj was in the back. We were all dancing, and the Bulla cart arrived in Mayapur temple. And so we went to the temple hall first, and Navayogendra Swami was chanting there. And Lokanath was leading the kirtan. As we came in, they got together, both of them, and they had a big kirtan for another 45 minutes. By the time it was already 11 o'clock, over 11. So then Maharaj said, "Well, let's go and see Prabhupada." And we were all climbing upstairs. And Hari Suri was standing there like this. He said, you can't go now. It's 11 o'clock. What is all this noise? Keep quiet, go back. Prabhupada is tired, he's sick, and he was standing there like this. And we were looking, like that. Prabhupada came out of his bathroom and turned to go into his room. And he was opening the door like this, and then he just turned this way and he saw us. He said, oh, bullock cart party, come. And Prabhu is standing here and we are all going this way, that way, over him. He's still standing there trying to stop us, at least trying to stop some of us. Everyone was in. Prabhupada sat down, wiped his nose like this, and he said, so, Lokanath Swami, how are you? And he seemed to be gaining strength. And he looked very tired, but he was becoming stronger. And he had this bottle of barfi. He opened that and he gave everyone one piece. And he asked, where were you last night? So Lokanath Swami said, this Gaudiya Math in Navadvip, one Gaudiya Math, they charged us 2 rupees per head to sleep in a Kirtan Mandap in front of the deities, which had no roof. Means they were charging us for the sky, 2 rupees each per head. And Prabhupada laughed and he said, oh, this is nothing. And he said, mutts, it's a big thing. He said, they used to use the shalagram for cracking the bitter nuts. He said, this is called mutt. And he said, this is what happens to the Brahmins. And like that. And then he said, then he asked every single, after Allahabad, till Mayapur, he was asking, did you go to this village? Did you meet this man there? He said, did you go to Fatehpur? Did you see that Gaurnitai Bhavan? Those nice deities? Did you visit there? And then it was like every single thing that was green in our memory, he was saying. And he said, you know how I know these places? Because I have gone to every single place for preaching. He said, I was staying in Gaurnitai Bhavan. And then he was telling, did he go here, did he go there? And he said, how did you do the Bihar side? How did you do the Bengal side? Were you in Bardwan? So Lokanath Swami said, yes, we came by the truck, but we got down in Bardwan and we started from there. Like that. And he was talking for a long time. Most probably he was talking for over an hour. And then he said, now that you have come to Mayapur, now you should go to Puri. Like that. And that was the last thing he said.
There were many stories. Then another time when we had the first Portuguese Bhagavatam, we were again, the same thing, we were so eager to give this to Prabhupada. So I was taking a flight from Sao Paulo to Lima, Peru, and then on to Los Angeles. And so the airport was in a very strange place, and every time we went there the car got lost and it got lost again. And we finally arrived at the airport after the flight had already boarded, and we were just determined we had to get this Bhagavatam to Prabhupada. So they said, I'm sorry, the flight's closed, and that's it. So Mahavir was there. He was also very fired up, so he actually grabbed the walkie-talkie from the lady at the counter and started talking to the people on the flight and said, hold that flight. So they held the flight. So then they said, all right, you have to hurry. So then we ran to the flight, and we were so late, they wouldn't even issue a ticket there. Mahavir had to stay behind and buy the ticket. I just got on the plane. When I got to Lima, Peru, they gave me the ticket. And then I went on to Los Angeles. We met Prabhupada. He arrived that next morning. He went on his Vyasa-san, spoke, and then I was so eager to give him this Bhagavatam because it pleased him so much, actually. You knew that it would always please him to give him these books. So as he was getting off his Vyasa-san, I couldn't wait till he got up to his room. I handed him the Bhagavatam. So then we finally went up to his room, and he looked at me and said, this is your most important service, printing and distributing books. So when he said that, those words, I felt went deep into my heart. It was actually a very important moment for me when he said that. So, But you could always please Prabhupada that way. I had the experience of being the GBC of all Latin American. Of course, we had so many projects. There were all kinds of things going on, you can imagine. And yet when I would go to see Prabhupada, the first question would always be, so, how is the Sankirtan? How many books are being distributed? He would ask that question.
Anilo prema dana karuna prachu